No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. This is Outspoken Live episode number 154. And I can't believe this is how we are starting the week. But actually, sadly, maybe I can, because British society is in decline. How else can you explain the fact our children are no longer safe at a Taylor Swift dance class or school? So this was the scene at All Saints Catholic High School in Sheffield today after a 15-year-old was stabbed at lunchtime. And in the past hour, this devastating announcement from South Yorkshire Police.
Sure. With great sadness that I share with you today, a teenager has died following a stabbing at a Sheffield school earlier today. Our thoughts are with the family of the boy, his friends, and the whole school community. At 12:17 p.m, emergency services were called to All Saints Catholic High School on Granville Road. The victim, a 15-year-old boy, suffered serious injuries.
In my digest next, why the British establishment are wrong to blame the knives themselves for the troubles we are very clearly facing. Then the brilliant Alex Phillips of the That's What She Said Substack joins me live to react to a terrible afternoon of news. Also coming up on the show today, Elon Musk has backed Reform UK to win the next UK general election, endorsing the party's surging MP Rupert Lowe, who has outplayed leader Nigel Farage by demanding hourly deportation flights in a bold address. GB News is slammed for biased coverage of Tommy Robinson's anti-isolation patriotic rally at the weekend. And lying, cheating Keir Starmer broke lockdown rules again. But the MSM is pretty much ignoring the story. Also, why did Ian Dale of LBC have a meltdown on air? I will show you. Then in the Uncancelled Aftershow on Substack, I'm teaming up again with the Royal News Network for all of the big headlines out of Buckingham Palace over the weekend. New pictures actually just released of Catherine, the Princess of Wales, including one taken by Louis, the young prince, I'm going to show you. Oh, and by the way, in Montecito, Meghan Markle has, surprise, emerged from her LA wildfires hibernation to gate crash another Hollywood event where she wasn't welcome. So you can watch that by signing up to my Substack, www.outspoken.live. Greatest Britain Union Jackass also returns today. I announced the Greatest Britain at the end of the show, but the great thing is the Union Jackass, you get to choose, you get to vote. Do so in the live chat on YouTube right now. The nominations, which come, by the way, from the Dan Wootton Outspoken Club on X. Here they are. Prince Harry, nominated by Six Felicity for pressuring King Charles. Kanye West, nominated by Anna Ireland for pimping his partner to hijack optics at the Grammy Awards. And the governor of Woodhill, nominee 3, Nicola Marfleet, she was nominated by Diana at Mother Clanger for being complicit in banning visitors for Tommy Robinson and blocking his son's phone number. So get voting. We've got to have a little bit of fun amongst this very sad news. So get voting live on YouTube. The results at the end of the show. But now, let's go. Our children are not safe at a Taylor Swift dance class during the school holidays. And they are not safe at school either. Today, an air ambulance was called to All Saints Catholic High School in Sheffield after a 15-year-old was stabbed with a 14-year-old arrested by police. Today, the MSM reluctantly broke away from covering lockdown cheat Slippery Starmer's latest uninspiring pro-UK diatribe in Brussels to break the news that is becoming all too predictable.
Police were called to reports of a stabbing at All Saints Catholic High School in Sheffield just after 12:15 this afternoon. When officers arrived, they quickly detained a teenage boy as they found that a 15-year-old youngster, another boy, had suffered serious injuries. He has been taken to hospital and we understand that his family are aware. Now, we do know that emergency services remain at the school itself.
Now, the head teacher of All Saints, Sean Pender, sent out a statement about today's incident to parents, saying that they have dealt with an extremely serious incident in school, resulting in us going into lockdown procedure. They said that the incident involved 2 students, one of whom we believe has been seriously injured. And Mr. Pender said that all other students are contained and safe. So that's a 14-year-old being detained by South Yorkshire Police, a school in lockdown, and a 15-year-old in hospital with serious injuries, and their family informed after reports of a stabbing.
And in the past hour, the devastating news we all feared.
It's with great sadness that I share with you today, a teenager has died following a stabbing at a Sheffield school earlier today. Our thoughts are with the family of the boy, his friends, and the whole school community. At 12:17 p.m, emergency services were called to All Saints Catholic High School on Granville Road. The victim, a boy.
Remember when we used to look arrogantly over at America when it came to school shootings and think it couldn't happen here? Well, it is happening here. Because British society is in decline. And I just feel a crushing and deep sense of sadness today about what I see with my own eyes as well. It's hard to shake. This weekend, my neighbour was robbed in broad daylight by 2 Asian men who threatened me with a drill when I confronted them. It was all to steal an electric bike. And then back to schools. A little covered case came to its conclusion today with a 14-year-old girl who stabbed 2 teachers and a pupil in Wales found guilty of attempted murder. Now, doesn't it say everything about this government that at the moment the 15-year-old was being killed at school, the Education Secretary, Phillips, was talking about Ofsted inspections? And sure, that's important, but when we can't even protect our children at the school gates? And as usual, the elite class seem to be desperate to look for irrational solutions. Now, Idris Elba is a great actor and a good man with honourable intentions. But the BBC giving him a massive platform to suggest knives without sharp blades should be introduced to the UK seems to me the ultimate example of missing the real problem.
The thing is that kitchen knives are perhaps 25% of the knives used in most of the terrible crimes. That's one of the stats in the films. And those kitchen knives are usually a domestic situation, okay? So kitchen knives, of course, it's very difficult. They're a domestic knife. I do think there is areas of innovation that we can do with kitchen knives. I hate to say it, not all kitchen knives need to have a point on them. That sounds like a crazy thing to say, but actually it would reduce. You know, you can still cut your food without the point on the knife, which is an innovative way to sort of look at it. And in a country in crisis, I'm sorry, but yeah, let's look at that.
And I have absolutely no doubt that the crime wave sweeping the country, we all know it, by the way, regardless of the official crooked stats, makes it more likely real political change is coming. And Elon Musk agreed this weekend. When Rupert Lowe, the Reform UK MP growing in power and stature, posted at the weekend, Reform now 4 points ahead in the latest polling, we are going to win the next election, real change is coming, Elon simply replied, true. And it is Rupert's fighting talk that is galvanising Brits into believing that that sort of Trump change is possible, including MAGA-style deportations.
In a recent debate with an immigration lawyer, another profession pork-barrelling a living, I was told that a deportation scheme on the scale required would be impossible, as it would take a flight leaving every hour. That sounds like a very good starting point to me. The message has to be clear. If you're in our country illegally, expect deportation. Implement that on the scale required, and the boats will stop overnight. I can promise you that. Just look at what we've done to ourselves. There is only one chance to save this country, and that is by electing a reform government in 2029 or before. We have been shown the way by one Donald John Trump.
And Labour is starting to panic, with its left-wing organ The Observer reporting yesterday how Reform UK can, and I will say will, win tons of Labour seats whenever the next election is called. And it is partly because there is now an MP like Rupert Lowe who is not afraid to say the country is in trouble because of mass immigration.
But friends, be in no doubt that our country is in the most precarious position I can remember. And what is the root cause? Uncontrolled mass immigration. Immigration, immigration, immigration. Legal and illegal. If raising legitimate concerns about thousands and thousands of unchecked foreign males illegally entering our country makes me far right, then so be it. If objecting to these men, often from alien cultures that hold no respect for women, being housed in luxury accommodation.
And like Trump, Rupert Lowe is prepared to admit that DEI policies are just another example of anti-white racism.
We should call DEI what it is, anti-white racism. We must eradicate the poisonous diversity industry, scrap every DEI-related job, and judge people on merit and merit alone. I couldn't care if a workforce is diverse or inclusive. I only care if it's competent. That is all that matters.
And Rupert Lowe is gaining huge popularity. With our children being stabbed to death at school and Labour doing nothing to address the country's declining law and order, it does feel to me a matter of when, not if, the Trump-Musk revolution comes to the UK via folk like Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage. The only question is how long we can realistically wait before our society crumbles. Now it's time for The Outsider. And I'm absolutely delighted today to be joined by Alex Phillips. That's what
Hello,
she
darling.
said. The Substack, which I absolutely endorse and think you should all follow. And Alex, so great to have you because I know you have been very unwell. And it is horrible, actually, to start on this note, Alex. But I don't know about you. When I saw that South Yorkshire Police press conference this afternoon confirming that a 15-year-old boy had been killed at school, stabbed to death, a 14-year-old has been arrested on a murder, suspicion of murder, I just felt this crushing sense of sadness and hopelessness about what is going on in our country.
Right. Do you know, it's a bit, last night I was actually having a conversation with my other half, and we were talking about incidents from the past where young children have been murdered, like Damilola Taylor, and how much attention it got in the press. And now it's almost as if this is becoming normalized, that actually a young child being stabbed, let alone by another young child, is something that is becoming so seemingly commonplace that it barely warrants the media furore that once upon a time it used to attract. And you have to ask yourself culturally, what is going on? Now, I have my theories. I think that a big part of this is we've imported cultures which have far higher levels of violence than our own innate culture. And I think as well, young children are being exposed to the glorification of violent crime, whether that be through things they're watching online, whether that be through groups on social media, whether that be through culture such as drill music. Now, we don't know the identity of these youngsters. I doubt we will, because the law precludes minors from being identified in the press. There'll be a lot of people who will suspect there might be a racial or cultural or religious element to this. But frankly speaking, now the problem of knife crime pervades society. It is across all communities. There was not long ago a similar story in Wales, actually, where a young girl aged 14 or 15 had brought a weapon to school, and the school had been locked down and armed police had to be called. And you kind of think to yourself, why is it that children are wanting to go out and violently harm, even murder other children? Something's gone so drastically wrong. I think we do need to start looking at online. Normally, I would not agree with anything the Home Secretary says in the form of Yvette Cooper, but she is talking about really cracking down on social media and online websites where violent content is available to young people. Not just young people, frankly, it should be violent content available to anybody. I do agree that that needs to happen. I think for too long, the World Wide Web has been the Wild Wild West, and it's been allowed to regulate itself. And there's all sorts of poisonous, toxic material on there, from pornography to violence, that is deeply harming mental health and social stability. But, you know, I think we do also need to have very, very complex conversations about cultural elements as well.
Well, I completely agree. And the problem is, Alex, it's all well and good for Yvette Cooper to try and say, oh, it's down to the social media companies, or it's down to Jeff Bezos and Amazon. But to me, that avoids what the real problem is. And what's so disturbing is people in America can see all too clear. I mean, I know you're just back from the inauguration in DC. They all know what's happening over here. JD Vance, Tucker Carlson, they know. Their elite class talk about the issues that are happening in the UK. We don't. And look, I don't want to personally attack Idris Elba. I know the guy. I know his heart is in the right place. But the problem is, Alex, it's ludicrous when we start suggesting, let's remove blades from all of our knives. It's like total diversion. And again, I'm not attacking him personally. I know he wants to do good, but that is not going to solve the issue. If people want to find a knife, they will find a knife.
Yeah, I mean, and not just a knife. There are all sorts of things which are now indiscriminately used as murder weapons. I mean, when people get older, cars seem to be something, and, you know, ramming into crowds of people. If people want to find a way to cause grievous bodily harm to somebody else, there are plenty of tools at their disposal. You just have to be rather creative. So it's a cultural issue that we have to address first. What is going on here? Again, we're not going to have much information, I don't think, about this particular incident. We don't know if it's gang related. We know that young people increasingly are being drawn into the drugs trade. We don't know if this is cultural, whether this is someone, say, from the Muslim faith stabbing someone from another faith. We don't know. We really don't know. These could be two white kids, two black kids, two Asian kids, a mixture. We have no idea what's gone on here. And like I said, the problem of knife crime now pervades so many sections of society, so many communities, that it'd be anybody's guess. But I do think this started with the importation of violent culture from other countries, because this didn't used to be a problem here. And I think that it's being fueled as well by the importation of violent culture from other countries. And I again hark back to things like drill music. What on earth are young people watching and consuming online that they are motivated to seek vengeance with mortal force? What is going on here? I mean, this really needs to be analysed from all directions. Yes, I think we do need to have conversations about regulation of the internet, of social media. This isn't about free speech, it is about safety. You wouldn't walk down a high street, right, and have sex shops and peep shows and places selling illegal drugs and young kids being able to buy cannabis gummies. And, you know, you would not have that in the physical, material world if you walk from, you know, from one side of a town centre to the other. But this is what the online atmosphere is like for many young people. So we do need to talk about that. But we shouldn't do that and go, well, that's going to solve the problem, or changing the way knives are made are going to solve the problem. The problem begins, frankly, with the people perpetrating these acts and what is getting into them, what is inspiring them and motivating them. And that is harrowing. You know, these are young kids. Young kids these days have lost any form of childhood innocence. They are exposed to way too much. We've had this conversation, okay, since I was a kid. You know, I remember with the awful incident of Jamie Bolger and that kidnapping, and we were told, oh, maybe it's violent computer games. You know, maybe on some level it is, actually. We've stopped having that conversation. And when you look at some of the games that young people are playing now, they're riddled with violence. But is it also some of the films they're watching, the music they're listening to? Is it just things going on in chat groups? Is it videos they're watching online on things like YouTube or on Snapchat? I mean, children need to be mollycoddled to some degree, and it isn't about free speech. It is about protecting them and their young plastic minds with an incubation of safety, because they're not old enough to make decisions. They're not old enough to formulate decent opinions, sound ideas. And they're usually hyper emotional with hormones rattling around all over the place. So you can't just throw them into a situation where they can be, accessed by anybody, encouraged by anyone, drawn into gangs, watch violence online and just go, oh, well, that's not going to have any repercussions.
Well, I know. And imagine if you are a youngster now, and this is certainly something that you probably didn't have growing up, Alex, or most people didn't have in our generation growing up here. You are going to be scared for your safety now at school, or your safety at a dance class. That is utterly, utterly appalling, because that plays with your psyche as well. But Alex, can I just ask you about the political dimension to this? We saw Rupert Lowe this weekend being incredibly bold at the Reform UK regional conference in Essex, especially on that issue of mass deportations, an area where it almost feels like he's positioning himself to the right of Nigel Farage, receiving the endorsement of Elon Musk, certainly in terms of what he's saying, just after this fallout between Musk and Farage. What do you make of the rise of Rupert Lowe?
Yeah, I mean, Rupert's just proven himself to be real high quality. I think a chart came out earlier showing the activity out of MP's office, and he's the second most active in Parliament, and it shows. Nigel is a party leader, okay? So Nigel is going to be very busy right now building the party up from the grassroots onwards. Nigel's an old hat in politics. He knows the game. He knows he's got to tread carefully. He also knows the media are using divide and conquer at the moment with reform. They can't help but want to bring up Tommy Robinson with Nigel. And Nigel knows all too well that that's a contentious subject for him, because the media will go to town if he runs to Tommy Robinson's defence, that eclipsing anything else he has to say and alienating one group of the electorate that right now, and you can tell by the polling, are going, I rather like reform. I could vote for them. And at the other side, he risks potentially losing the base votes because he's not coming out in defence of Tommy Robinson. What people need to understand is this is a tactic being used deliberately by other parties and the media to try and break up the solidity of Reform UK. Now, I have no doubt that whatever Rupert decided to say at the conference, Nigel would have known about it. There's only 5 of them in Parliament. It's not like they're not all meeting all the time and having conversations and discussing what policies should be. It's not like this is a party of 300 or pulling in different directions. And I have no doubt Nigel has said himself repeatedly that we need to have deportations of people who are here illegally. There is a sort of strain right now, people wanting reform to go much further, much faster. But again, you've got to be politically astute. And we're looking and applauding what Donald Trump is doing. He is deporting criminals. He is deporting people who have broken into the country. He is deporting people who have broken the law. And that is what reform is saying needs to be done. It's interesting. Today, elite reporters come out of the EU, authored initially by Poland, saying that the EU are now thinking of leaving the 1951 Refugee Convention, which is the treaty in which you have to give someone asylum if they come to claim it in your country. And it prohibits refoulement, which is essentially, once there's been a deportation decision or in the process of that happening, the risk of someone being sent to a country that is deemed unsafe. Now, this report says that, people are coming here claiming asylum, but they don't want to integrate. They're creating balkanized communities. They're subverting European culture, European values. It's breaking up our society. And so we're going to potentially leave that treaty. That is astonishing. But when I look back to the hubris and the histrionics that Nigel Farage faced during the Brexit campaign, when he stood in front of that billboard with the snake of migrants coming across Europe, and it just said breaking point. He knew what was coming over the horizon. So I am not prepared to see Nigel being thrown under the bus as if all of a sudden he's irrelevant, as if someone's doing better than him. This is his game. He wrote the game. He's the one who's pushed politics where it's got to now. He's the one who's been the leading voice to that in the country. He's the one who time and again has shown that he's ahead of the arguments, that he is the vanguard for common sense, that he has the courage and the bravery to stick his head above the parapet. Right now, he's got to be a party leader, and his approach, whatever people might think, his approach is working. You look at that polling, his approach is working. If he had any issue with Rupert Lowe saying what Rupert Lowe has said, Rupert Lowe wouldn't have said it. So don't think for any minute that this is two people singing off different hymn sheets or one person bettering the other. This is a party which speaks with one voice because they're small enough, solid enough, brave enough. They've known each other a long time. We were all MEPs in that parliament together. Okay, I was there when reform was really being set up, and I was the one who encouraged the former Brexit Party MEPs to get back involved with reform. When it was just Richard Tice and David Bull, I got in there and said to the Rupert Lowes of this world, you need to come back. And I would be there myself, were I not a broadcaster, with a channel that says you can't be political because Ofcom will have your guts for garters, and that's my main source of income. I would be there myself. So I know what goes on in that party, and I don't particularly like to see this narrative coming out as if there are these divisions, as if one person's doing better than the other. They are proper teammates and allies who believe in the same thing and who have shown audacity and tenacity. And that is what this country needs. So let's just keep backing them.
Yes, and beautifully put. And by the way, as I keep saying, Alex, I would be very happy with Nigel Farage as Prime Minister, Rupert Lowe as Home Secretary, and I'd quite like Alex Phillips in the cabinet too. Actually, I would be very happy with that. And I think it's a good point to make that Nigel is attempting to be a party leader. And it's very, very important to remind people of that. Breaking right now, the anti-isolation march for Tommy Robinson took place through central London at the weekend. But the incredible, positive, non-violent scenes, surprise, surprise, ignored by the mainstream media, including GB News. Here's what they chose not to show you. But Liam Tufts, really good guy, podcaster, close friend of Tommy Robinson, posted after watching GB News coverage of the event, I'm starting to lose faith in GB News. Stick to your word and be the people's channel. I'll get reaction from Alex Phillips in just one moment, but here's what Liam had to say.
Just an observation before I call it a night after a glorious day in the capital of our country, standing tall and side by side with the working class patriots of Great Britain. I noticed GB News have reported on the events that took place today in London, and the camera action was veered on the anti-racist and the anti-fascist protest, which was embarrassing because they were 95% white, and the Stop the Isolation event was a wide range and mixture of races. Seems bizarre that the camera footage that GB News put out is of a small group of wallies protesting against people that genuinely protest and detest racists. So, GB News, are you the people's channel? Is there someone preventing you from reporting the truth? Great footage you would have had today. 100,000 people waving Union Jacks. At one stage, they were singing the YMCA You can't get more fair and friendly than that. But I noticed GB News haven't reported properly on what took place today in London. I'm starting to lose faith in you, GB News. You must do better.
A lot of good patriots weighed in after Liam posted that video. Chris Davies wrote, Liam, GB News is part of the establishment. I backed them 100% until they sacked Mark Stein and stopped watching completely when they fired Dan Wootton, Lawrence Fox and Calvin Robinson. They are controlled opposition and anything but the People's Channel. Avoid. Lawrence Fox posted, it was forever thus. So let me bring in Alex Phillips on this, who has an interesting point of view. Because Alex, Brexit Party MEP, GB News launch presenter, works in the mainstream and independent media, and has been one of the only MSM journalists to interview Tommy Robinson before he went to prison. So, Alex, do you think there is any excuse for a broadcaster like GB News not to cover this type of protest, which, let's be honest, was totally positive? No violence, and actually is full of people who watch their channel and want to support their channel?
Yeah, well, look, I'm not exactly the first person to jump up and down and cheer for GB News after the way they treated me. They can rot in hell, as far as I'm concerned. One of these days when I'm not under an NDA, I will tell my story. That is not going to be today. But is there any excuse for them to have not covered it? Yes, there is actually, and I think we both know what it is. There's a number of excuses. The first one is this remains a regulated channel. They choose to remain on linear television. I think a lot of their viewers probably watch them on their televisions, actually on the channel rather than online. But that, of course, comes with the hefty punishment of being regulated by Ofcom. And I remember, I was just talking about this the other day, actually, with my other half. I remember when I had people on talking about the origins of COVID, because when the channel launched, we were still in the midst of COVID. We were still partially locked down and social distancing. And I had a number of people on talking about that, from Matt Ridley, who's did the book Virus.
Yes.
Professor Angus Dalgleish, who is the world expert of virology and knew full well that that thing was made in a lab, could even point at whose handiwork it had been. And they came to me and said, you mustn't do this again. You mustn't have this on again. There have been warnings and complaints from Ofcom. So I think on one level, they should fight with a hand tied behind their backs because they remain on linear television. And unless you're not going to be regulated by Ofcom, you're in trouble. You are controlled opposition. Now, the other thing, of course, that they have faced is this channel launched with a £63 million budget to last them 3 years. They spaffed it up the wall in the first year. They've been perennially in a doom loop of losing money ever since. Their viewing figures might be good. The figures on the bank account probably aren't as good. And one of the reasons that it's impacted them and they haven't started reaping the benefits of the footfall that they might be getting is because of advertising boycotts. And again, when the left moves, it moves. And when it was decided that Stop Funding Hate were going to come after GB News and intimidated various sponsors and various advertisers to not advertise with the channel. And unfortunately, a lot of the big advertisers now are sold through big ad agencies in London who are all woke. It meant that GB News could only get the odd, advert for spray-on hair and tarpaulins made in Merthyr Tydfil, which isn't going to fund the operation of a linear channel. So in that respect, GB News have kind of wedged between a rock and a hard place because they know that if they cover the sort of material that the audience might like, they're going to be in trouble with Ofcom, facing fines from them, in trouble with advertisers, facing blocks from them. So where are they going to get their money? So that is the commercial reality right now of having a channel on television. It's going to take a lot to try and change that. But this is why more and more people are not only sort of leaving the BBC, leaving Sky. They're in huge trouble, aren't they? They're sort of, on the brink of going bust. Sky News anyway. They've always been propped up by the border channel. But more and more people now are even wanting to leave GB News, which was set up to be an antidote for all of this, and come to channels like yours, Dan, because this is where there isn't censorship, because you don't have to worry about whether, Flash want to advertise their cleaning products on your channel. You don't have to worry about whether Ofcom's going to come after you with a big old fine yet. Do expect under the Labour government there to be more regulation as a whole over all sorts of forms of broadcasting. But we live in this period of flux, and actually what's happening in America is quite reassuring, because it seems to have reached a pinnacle of woke,
Yep.
that it is going to start being killed off now. And you know what, like I said, I don't have many kind words for GB News, because I've still got a bitter taste in my mouth about what happened to me, but I do wish them all the best, and I do want channels to thrive, because if channels are not allowed to say what they like on linear TV, which is still the preferred method of viewing for a lot of people, we don't live in a free speech nation. We don't live in a true democracy. So for me, it's important actually that all the things that are facing GB News and preventing it from doing this, if there weren't advertising boycotts, if there wasn't Ofcom regulation, would they have a bolder editorial? I kind of think they probably would. I'm going to give them credit for that. I think they would. But the reality of the 21st century means, because they insist on still being on television, they're never going to be able to do what the viewers want them to do.
Very beautifully explained. And I always look back positively, I think, even though it was a nightmare in so many ways, Alex, because look, we came across each other, didn't we? It's these types of friendships, and hopefully we can take now that original mission, which we hoped we would get to do on GB News, into this independent space where you're doing brilliant things on Substack, and I know have lots of exciting plans. And I personally believe that is the future, because there is far less chance of an individual being corrupted, and especially an individual who isn't regulated and doesn't have to deal with advertising boycott. So I couldn't agree with you more. What was interesting, though, Alex, is some of the journalists, the sound journalists who did try and cover these protests at the weekend, were actually attacked, but not by the Tommy Robinson supporters, but by the Be Kind lot. You know, the Narinder Kaur and all of that. So I wanted to show you what went down with Jess Gill specifically.
We were literally harassed at the Counter Tommy Robinson protest.
Man literally put his hand on us both.
Yeah, pushed us, these 6-foot men, and the police turned a blind eye and threw us off the property. Put signs in our faces. They were super hostile. It was, you couldn't make it up. We're obviously just two young girls, two young women. We weren't asking anything hostile, we were asking...
I was wearing this badge, you know, my Stop Fascism badge. I was one of them.
So true, so true. But no, they weren't having it. We weren't asking anything controversial. We were supposedly the problem. Asking questions.
They told us the police would arrest us if we didn't leave. And mind you, the police saw that men were putting their hands on us.
They turned a blind eye. They called us far right. The police called us far right.
One of the police officers was friends with a couple of people at the protest.
Well, it looks like it.
He was saying, hey, how are you doing? I've not seen you for a while, which goes to show there was a friendship between him and the protesters. And they told us that we are a far-right organisation.
How are we the problem?
So we don't deserve to be at a left-wing protest. We don't deserve to be asking...
They were literally hurling abuse at us. The protesters were hurling abuse at us in front of the police.
I mean, Alex, that is surely an example of two-tier policing in action, which is why I think it's a real shame that we don't have mainstream journalists down there, because it is left to independent folk like Jess Gill who get treated like that.
Yeah, and also, you know, whatever one's political views, this is an event. It should have been covered as an event. You know, Jess Gill's brilliant. I love her. Well done, Jess, you brave wee thing. Welcome to the world, can I just say, you know.
And she can take it. She's big enough. She can take it.
She can take it. I mean, I remember I was an MEP and they used to insist on having that sort of, you know, adult jamboree on College Green all the time with all those twats wearing berets and crap like that. You know, the sort of ones who never got over the end of Glastonbury Festival for their age group. And the broadcasters loved it. And I remember going to have interviews on College Green and people spitting on me and actually pulling out handfuls of hair during the Brexit years. And the police had to escort me onto College Green. And, you know, there weren't any arrests. It was almost like, well, that's fine because you're a Brexit Party MEP, you probably deserve it. You know, I'm going to say something quite radical here. We've just had the 60th anniversary of the closure of Auschwitz. And there's been a lot of hand-wringing about what this all means and the lessons we should learn from history. And what people seem to not talk about is, you know, you want to know how a whole society of people could be led blindly into the persecution of others. The people who were the persecutors in Germany, the people who joined the National Socialist movement, it was a socialist movement, that is the Z in Nazi, were academics, they were professors, they were the learned classes, they were members of the police force. They weren't the working classes in factories who just had, you know, supposedly racist views. No, this was the sort of intelligentsia of that society. It was the middle classes who wanted to keep up appearances. And we're seeing this again, aren't we? We're seeing once again those who have an appetite for fascistic control, those who like state control, those who like to see people being silenced or thrown in prison, those who want to dictate ideology, those who want to erase religion and replace it with their own pseudo-morality, those who want to pit one group of people against the other, whether this is through DEI policies. It is the middle classes, it is the intelligentsia of this country. So have we learnt lessons? No, we have not. But do I think we are beginning to learn those lessons? Yes. And I just think people like Jess Gill need to keep on going. At the end of the day, there are far more sensible people out there from all classes. You know, my other half always tells me off for pointing a finger of blame at the middle classes. I am one, you know, but I don't really have a better explanation, a better title for this group of people. We all know who they are. But I do live in some hope that this nonsense is beginning to turn around. But what we've got to be mindful of is actually for so long, in order to get on in the police, you've had to sit there and do your diversity training. You've had to say the thing in the locker room. You've had to be fearful about the pronouns when you arrest someone. And it's the same in the teaching profession. It's the same in the civil service. This is why so many people from those classes are woke, because they've been forced to be. In order to get on their professions, they've had to get on that conveyor belt of brainwashing. And actually, a lot of them are so brainwashed now that they can't see the roots from the trees. They've lived this existence where they've been told that this is the right way and the only way, and to think differently is subnormal and ghastly. And so it's going to take a long time for them to be snapped out of it. But I think it will happen.
Alex, there was a fascinating interview that went viral over the weekend between Piers Morgan and Tucker Carlson. There's so much I could say about it, but I just want to show you the particular moment where Piers raised Tommy Robinson and was clearly at odds with Tucker, because I'm fascinated to know your point of view on this exchange.
And also, look at the case of Tommy Robinson. Tommy Robinson, most Americans I speak to think he's in jail as some kind of political prisoner like Nelson Mandela for having views about
or Julian Assange.
Yeah, but that's not why Tommy Robinson's in jail, because he defamed a young Syrian refugee.
Defamed?
Yeah, he lied about him.
Okay.
Well, he did. But he was then the guy eventually.
How many of your leaders have gone to jail for lying?
What?
How many of your leaders have gone to jail for lying? They lie constantly. Every time they speak, they lie.
Not enough. It's not enough.
Right around zero, actually.
Yeah, but that doesn't.
But they throw powerless people in jail for saying things they don't.
So I was fully with Tucker on this one. Alex, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, look, Piers Morgan fits perfectly into the category that I've just talked about. People who have had to be deferential to certain ideologies to get on in their careers. People think that Piers Morgan is some sort of free speech absolutist and brave and opinionated. He's nothing of the sort. He really isn't. He's, you know, he doesn't like Brexit. He's not one of us, really. And I like Piers. Look, I worked with him at Talk. I like him tremendously. But the idea that he is courageous and fighting the good fight on behalf of the unheard in the United Kingdom is frankly ridiculous. And Tucker Carlson does make a point. Look, Tommy Robinson committed what is essentially a civil offence. It was contempt of court. He made a documentary. And actually, the irony is, of course, the documentary he made was all about how the professional classes are manipulated and close ranks, particularly when it comes to certain issues, and talking about the particular child he allegedly defamed. His argument was actually there was a cover-up on the nature of this child and the behaviour of this child. And so he was actually talking about the cover-up, and the cover-up has continued, and he is in prison. Tommy knew he would end up in prison. He also made a conscientious choice that he was going to do what he did anyway. And a very brave choice it was. And I think he made that calculated decision knowing that the cause would be further advanced if he ended up in prison. And it has been. Tommy Robinson is now somebody who's garnered international celebrity and a huge fan base in America and a huge fan base amongst people with a great amount of power in America. So I think he's a very clever man. And he knew what he's doing. I like Tommy a great deal. Like you, Dan, I went to see Tommy in prison. And I think that when it comes to journalism and reporting, he's done a great amount in, being the first really to try and have this conversation. I think that there's been a huge amount of misinformation put about. I wonder if Piers Morgan has ever sat and looked through old EDL videos and tried to find the smoking gun of racism. I wonder if he's watched the film that Tommy Robinson made. I wonder if he's actually spoken to Tommy Robinson, as we both have done. In recent years. I wonder if he is just going along with the mainstream narrative because he's always worked for mainstream outlets. I think it's probably the latter. And this is the thing, people in America haven't, they're not sort of stuck in that straitjacket that our broadcasters and our commentators and our politicians are. There's nothing for them to lose about really delving into this topic and investigating it for themselves. But on that note, look, when it comes to those two, Tucker Carlson has got a bit balmy lately. I like Tucker Carlson a great deal. Most of the time I listen to him and think he's absolutely brilliant. But we also have to be mindful that there seems to be a trend now of people who once upon a time were really sound, opinion drivers on the right. A few of them seem to have been going a little bit, a bit far as well. What will be interesting is to see the reaction nationally and internationally when Tommy Robinson is actually released and to see the news coverage then. Will they can't ignore it anymore. They largely didn't really talk about him before he went to prison. The day he comes out, it'll be interesting to see what the conversation is in mainstream media.
Yes, and I was really interested by the comments Lee Anderson made over the weekend, by the way. The Mercian pointed this out because he said of Tommy Robinson, he doesn't even want to join Reform UK. He's made that quite clear. Tommy Robinson says a lot of things that a lot of people agree with. And yeah, on the grooming gangs, yeah, there is a lot of stuff there that I agree with him on. Alex, I thought that was the perfect position for a Reform UK MP to take. Great messaging. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, and this is it. But also remember, has Tommy Robinson been saying, I want to be in Reform UK from prison? No, he has not. I think that Tommy would rather people in Reform didn't sort of throw him under the bus. I know that's what he thinks because he has said that to me repeatedly. He just sort of says, why can't they just leave me alone? But it's not them doing it. It's the media playing a game of trying to skewer Reform UK by pushing this issue. And I think Lee Anderson has got the balance about right there. Don't let our opposition, don't let the mainstream media create this straw man and try and divide us. That's what they're trying to do. And also for anyone sitting there going, well, why don't they just come out and support Tommy Robinson? It's about numbers, it's about winning elections, and it's about coverage. And I can tell you this right now, if Nigel Farage or, Rupert or any of them turned around and said, I really like Tommy Robinson, it would be the only thing you'd hear about. That's the only thing the media would ever want to talk to. They're trying to do it now. It's the only subject they want to speak to Reform UK about. It would block out all of the other sound and sensible issues they're raising in front of the public that is garnering them such support in the polls. And sadly, when you want to win elections, when you want to get polling that looks above 30%, which is the kind of area you need to be getting to, the threshold you need to beat to start really winning seats in meaningful numbers, you're going to have people who vote for you who for a long time have been told that Tommy Robinson is a thug, a hooligan, a racist, an Islamophobe, whatever, and will feel uncomfortable if the party backed Tommy Robinson. That is just the truth of the numbers. But like Lee is saying, it's a non-issue. We don't know what Tommy thinks. He's in prison. We don't, this idea that this is some sort of wedge in reform is an invention. It really isn't. So I think that people who like the politics of Reform UK just go, that's a political party and I like their politics. You can also like Tommy Robinson at the same time or dislike Tommy Robinson at the same time. You like the politics of a political party, and let's just leave it there and don't let the opposition to reform win this game.
Breaking right now, slippery Starmer, Mr. Rules, broke lockdown rules at at the height of the so-called COVID pandemic more than once. And this new revelation, broken in the book Get In, the inside story of Labour under Starmer, being serialised at the Sunday Times, should be being covered by every mainstream media outlet. So let me take you through the revelation. It was about this woman called Leonie Mellinger. This is the first time we've heard about her, an actress and so-called communication skills coach who was with Starmer apparently at all times. So much so that he made her a key worker. Now, here's the key line from the book. Those who worked with Starmer on that leadership campaign say his triumph would not have been possible without Mellinger, who helped him navigate the transition from courtroom to Commons chamber, television studio, and debating stage. He considered her role so essential that Mellinger even qualified for key worker status during the pandemic. She visited Labour headquarters in a mask on Christmas Eve in 2020, advising Starmer as he considered his response to Boris Johnson's deal. Now, as Guido Fawkes reports today, there are at least a few problems with this. On Christmas Eve in 2020, the UK was in the tiered system of regional COVID lockdowns. At that time, Labour HQ was located in central London. London had been placed in Tier 4 on Sunday, the 20th of December. In other words, there was no way this woman should be there. Her coaching could have been done in person. Now, Starmer at the time, you must remember this, he was so sanctimonious, even though it was later discovered that through Beargate he had broken the rules another time. But his words in 2020 could not be misinterpreted. He said, whatever tier you're in, it's important to follow the rules. It's important we all say that, the government and the opposition. In fact, just to annoy you, let's remind you of the way that he was lecturing us.
It's very important that whatever the rules are, everybody follows them. So I say follow the government advice. Whatever tier you're in, follow the rules. It's very important that we all say that, the government and the opposition.
Alex Phillips. Just imagine if the mainstream media had done their job at the time, Starmer would have had to resign. And he absolutely conducted a witch hunt against Boris Johnson for far, far less.
Yeah. Well, the witch hunt against Boris Johnson came from within the Conservative Party as well. There are plenty of forces who wanted Boris gone and plenty of forces who really wanted Sir Keir Starmer to be the next Prime Minister. We just live in a joke of a democracy, especially when it comes to reportage by the mainstream media in this country. I mean, look, Sir Keir Starmer, if we had a different political system, he'd be gone. We'd have a device by which we could remove him. I think looking at the polling, he deserves to be curtains. Unfortunately, we don't have a system in place where that's going to happen. Perhaps there are people, hopeful people, that will try and dig this up in a way to try and get, the parliamentary watchdog to, look back over it, the standards committee to force some sort of, device by which he could be removed as leader. But I think it's kind of for the birds. I just think everyone needs to remember, looking back at lockdown, how pernicious and how perverse politicians were, and how, part of this, the media wanted more, didn't they? I remember those press conferences. Are you going to lock down? Are people going to die? The media, they basically wanted to just lock everyone in their houses and for this to be the Spanish flu of 1918. They were desperate. They loved looking at the death rates. They loved talking about, killing Granny and wanting the government to go harder, faster, stronger, as did the Labour Party. And the untold damage that it has done to this country, when we talk about the state of the economy, when we talk about the state of the NHS, when we talk about kids stabbing each other, remember that a lot of those kids had a year, if not 2 years, not in the classroom, left to their own devices. Truancy rates, as a result, in this country have never gone back to what they were at pre-pandemic levels. So now you've ended up with a load of feral children behaving like zombies. COVID created so much disruption and destroyed so much the fabric of our society, both materially and psychologically. And people need to remember that when they look at these people in government, when they look at the media, because it won't be long, I bet you, It won't be long before the next thing comes up where this collusion between the mainstream media and politicians happen again. It won't be in the public's interest. We've got to be alive to it. And, you know, maybe they will find enough to get rid of Sir Keir Starmer. Sadly, I think it's for the birds.
You know, when you see a tweet or a post on X and it just sums up how ridiculous a situation was, but also how tragic a situation was. It was this post from Norm I saw yesterday that did it for me. He wrote, "Now we know," referring to Queen Elizabeth II, "she could have had a voice coach with her to comfort her." And of course, referring to the fact that the late Queen Elizabeth II sat completely on her own at her own husband's funeral. Look, I absolutely was breaking the rules myself. You know, I was campaigning against the rules, Alex. I never believed in the rules, and I would have said, lock me up if you want to. But the point was, Starmer, as you rightly suggest, was the one driving us into harder, longer lockdowns. And it is just so typical of someone like him that he genuinely not only believed the rules didn't apply, but clearly knew that the mainstream media were never going to go for him. He was a protected species.
Yeah, well, we have a problem, don't we, that people do things simply for political gain and not what is right. What would have been right is to see some cross-party harmony saying, are we really doing the right thing by shutting up schools and preventing people being comforted at funerals? The Queen was emblematic of so many people who lost loved ones during the pandemic. People who didn't have the dignity of a proper funeral. It was sick. It was awful. It should never have happened. Even now, we're not asking the right questions. We've got this ridiculous COVID inquiry, which seems to be, did we lock down hard enough? Did we lock down long enough? Not should we have locked down at all. We're still not looking into the fact that, you know, sensible doctors, surgeons, psychologists, medical practitioners signed the Barrington Declaration saying this is not the right approach. The results of the, of what we're doing to try and contain COVID are going to be worse than COVID itself. They were made to seem like lunatics. They were blacklisted in their own professions and careers. They were silenced online. They were censored. It's all very well now, the Mark Zuckerbergs of this world suddenly going, oh yeah, right wing's the new rock and roll. We made mistakes during COVID. The censorship that was allowed to take place on social media, dictated from national governments, dictated by the World Health Organization, was pure evil. Thank goodness America has left the World Health Organization. Something like this can never, ever happen again. Like I said before, people need to stay alive to this and be aware. We've lived in a high trust society for too long where we've actually believed politicians do things for the right reasons. We've believed journalists know what they're talking about. Well, guess what? None of those things are true. Politicians don't do things for the right reasons. Too many of them do it for the sake of just politicking. They're cynical, they're venal, they're narcissistic, they have no ideology, they don't really care about the people. And the last time I met a journalist who actually had researched their topic and really wanted to tell the truth was, well, probably never in the whole history of my profession as a journalist. So, you know.
I just want to give you a clap for that, Alex. Oh, so true. So true. So beautifully put. Look, stand by, Alex Phillips, because in 1 minute, I want to show you the moment that Ian Dale of LBC, or the Labour Broadcast Company, as I call it, lost it on air and decided to throw off his Trump guest. It was quite something. It really is worth watching, and we'll get Alex's reaction too. But first, you know how often I talk about the need for free speech to be protected online, but I have been thinking lately of the need for personal protection from snoopers, bad actors, and hackers, and I'm delighted to tell you I have now found the solution. And what's more, this VPN, or virtual private network to use the full term, is also a life changer when it comes to providing you entertainment and information from anywhere in the world. So I need to tell you about Surfshark. It is an incredible and easy to use service that encrypts all your internet traffic, meaning your online activity stays safe so you can shop, stream, browse, and conduct your banking online in complete privacy. But the thing is, the benefits of Surfshark actually go way beyond keeping you safe online, because this app allows you to access your favorite entertainment and news shows and channels anywhere in the world. That includes streaming services, by the way, like Hulu, iPlayer, HBO Max, and Peacock. Or if you have a favourite show that is blocked on a service like Netflix here in the UK or Amazon Prime or Disney Plus elsewhere, within seconds you can be watching as if you're in another country. It's really great for sport too. If you're travelling for work or on holiday, you can get all your favourite content from home. Surfshark is also an insurance policy against creeping censorship because many countries are now considering blocking certain platforms. France, for example, has blocked Rumble. So Surfshark allows you to watch anything, anytime, anywhere. It is true freedom. A VPN can also save you money because you get the best deals from websites that change their prices depending on where you're buying from. There are other benefits of Surfshark too. You can use on unlimited devices, and your entire household can stay safe with just one subscription. There are over 3,200 servers in over 100 countries, meaning a world of choices at your fingertips. Plus, if this is your first time using a VPN, and if it is, my goodness, I recommend you get one ASAP, 24/7 customer service available to you. Go to surfshark.com/outspoken for an extra 4 months of Surfshark at an unbeatable price. What's more, Surfshark, so confident they're the best VPN in the world. I use them. I can vouch for that. They will give you a full refund within 30 days if you're not entirely satisfied. So go to surfshark.com/outspoken for an extra 4 months of Surfshark at an unbeatable price. But now, back to the show. Breaking right now, Ian Dale of LBC, what I now describe as the Labour Broadcasting Company, has had an epic on-air meltdown while interviewing a Trump supporter. This is a guy, by the way, who used to be considered a conservative. He posted on X, in case you missed it, "This is the 4 minutes that provoked me to throw this deranged, bigoted Trump supporter off my show last night. It doesn't happen often, and no doubt some think I should have let him continue with his awful bullshit, but I've absolutely no regrets." I'm not going to make you sit through the whole 4 minutes because an Ian Dale interview would put me to sleep at any time of the day. However, here's the key moment.
Even if you believe that, do you think it's appropriate for the President of the United States within 24 hours, when you have 67 families grieving, is it really appropriate to indulge in this unevidenced speculation when surely what he should be doing is encouraging the flight investigators to get to the truth?
Well, first of all, the idea that the flight investigators need to be encouraged to go get the truth. Look, I've investigated many things in the military, many things as a lawyer. I didn't need the permission of somebody to go find the truth. And I certainly dragged information out of people reluctant to share it. As for the timing, well, I'd like to see the memo about when the timing's right. All I know is every time some psychotic leftist murderer goes on a shooting spree, within 40 seconds, I get told I need to disarm myself because me being able to defend myself from criminals and tyrants, along with tens of millions of other Americans, is the cause of yet another crime. So I'm going to need to know what the rule is.
Right.
In the meantime, I'm going to go with this one.
Can you get this numbskull off our programme, please? I'd never want to speak to him again. He is the kind of person that makes America look ridiculous on the world stage. Never invite him on again.
And Alex Phillips, there is a growing gulf, isn't there, between MAGA supporters and, I guess, establishment conservatives in the UK. But what did you make of Dale's decision there?
I love that guy. Can you get him on? That Chris guy, he's amazing. I love that. He makes such a good point, which is the minute there's some sort of, terrorist attack, the first thing we're told is Islam's the religion of peace. Don't say anything bad about Muslims. Muslims are really great. Everyone's got to calm down. This is just someone with mental health issues. Straight away before any information comes out, we're given the opposite information in order to shut us up. So actually, he makes a really valid point there. Look, Donald Trump shoots in the hip, doesn't he? I mean, there is a sort of, in my mind, a sort of statesman-like protocol where you don't go straight in for the political in the immediate aftermath to an accident. And I say that as Donald's biggest fan, but Donald doesn't play by those rules. Ian Dale, though, I mean, it's such a shame, right? Ian Dale at one point was, I mean, he wasn't ever really a conservative by my standards. He was a Cameroonian conservative, which are basically kind of Lib Dems who like the free market. And that's the sort of Ian Dale category. But, you know, Global, apart from Nick Ferrari, who still holds fort at breakfast and gets really good numbers, Global have just become this parody left-wing entity. The problem is they're doing very well out of it. When you look at all the podcasts that they push out as well and the people presenting those, there's a whole sort of, you know, extreme leftist network of wokery. And poor old Ian Dale, who's supposed to be the right-wing voice, is sort of stuck in the middle of that swamp and so has to sort of go along with his paymasters, one assumes. But, you know, I remember during the election campaign, I remember that election, our snap election, that is, last year. I remember it well because I wasn't allowed to do anything. I was taken off air for the entire 6 weeks the campaign was taking place because I'd been elected 5 years ago to a parliament we're no longer members of for 6 months for a political party that doesn't even exist anymore. But that was enough for them to say you're not allowed to present during the election. And so I went and spent a lovely 6 weeks in France. Ian Dale, however, made this big announcement. I'm going to go stand as a Conservative Party candidate for somewhere in Kent or something like that, or Buckinghamshire, I don't know, some satellite of London. Something went tits up and he ended up not doing it. And it was really embarrassing. It was the most sort of cringeworthy thing I've ever seen happen. And the next day he's back on broadcasting, pretending he's all neutral and there's nothing to see here, Ofcom, just as Ed Balls is interviewing his wife. So, you know, these people are just part of the cosy establishment. They look after each other and they're not proper journalists, are they? Like I said, and, you know, this is now a sort of trope. It started off really with the right wing doing it, throwing people off air that they disagreed with. James Whale at Talk is the master of doing that, and then Mike Graham. And it seems now to be the thing that they want to do to try and get audience. You know, I really want to sort of throw someone off air and that's going to go viral for all the right reasons. That it doesn't really work for Ian Dale, does it? He's hardly, you know, he's hardly Mr. Terrifying. But yeah, there you go. But what I would say, Dan, is get that guy on, get that American.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And you know what? I know what you're saying about Global, but I still think they are on the decline. They are losing tens of millions of pounds, even though they have all of those mainstream radio stations, even though they control all of the billboards really around the country, and they are still losing tens of millions because there is this great switch off the mainstream media. There was one other DEI related thing though, Alex, that I just had to end on. I had to end on today because I just think it is so hilarious. Did you see Sadiq Khan over the weekend removed his pronouns from his X profile? So you'll see there they were, he, him, as if we didn't know, and then they were gone. Now this of course follows many left-wingers doing exactly the same thing in America, including the former Transport Secretary Pete Buttigieg. However, the hilarious thing is that Khan then said, oh no, it was just a technical error, I'm getting them reinstated. What did you make of it?
Love it. Do you know, when woke is finally killed off, and this proves my point that I keep saying, when woke is finally killed off, all the people who went along with the pronouns crap, all the people who went along with the world is on fire, climate change, all the people who went along with giving kids hormones and encouraging them to chop their tits off and stuff like that, will never admit to it. They will always say, I always thought it was a bit wrong. Yes, I never did it. No, you know, they're all hoping to kind of reverse ferret. Now it's becoming unpopular. They're hoping to just sort of sneak away from it and pretend they were never part of it. Well, guess what? We've got the receipts, Khan.
We have the receipts. You always have the receipts, Alex Phillips. I absolutely love it. I love having you on Outspoken. We'll be seeing you much more over the course of the year. And by the way, so glad that you've got better, because that flu virus thing that's going around has been really bad. Really bad.
I just want to know, I've put it on Twitter, right? I seriously think, I'm not, you know, I am sort of slightly drawn to wanting there to be conspiracy theories. I'm Alex. But there's something funny going on. The amount of people who've had this flu and the amount of young people who've been hit so hard. One of the guys I was working with, we went over to an inauguration together. He's only just flown home today. He's had to have medics out to the hotel we were staying in twice. And I've got, my main symptom is this major dizziness. like the infection's in my brain, in my inner ear canal, and it's sort of, I constantly am getting vertigo. I've never had it before. And I put something on Twitter and so many people are just messaging me going, me too, me too, me too. So I'm like, okay, what's going on? If you can find out anything, Dan, find that out for me.
Absolutely. We will get on that. We will get on that. Alex Phillips, so brilliant to have you. We will speak next week. Thank you so much. And, well, you're loving Alex Phillips. Chris Timothy has written and saying, we need Alex in Parliament. She most likely wouldn't get in because she has too much common sense. I think she will get in, though. I actually think we will see Alex Phillips in Parliament after the next election. That's my personal view, if she chooses to run, of course. Lee Edwards, on this whole idea that GB News isn't properly covering Tommy Robinson, he wrote, my concern is that Reform UK and GB News will just become mainstream. And Ronald writes, it was disgraceful the way they treated Mark Stein after he had a heart attack. On the issue of knives, because of course so concerned and upset today about this stabbing death of a 15-year-old boy at a school in Sheffield. Daz writes, weird we had knives 20 plus years ago and knife crime was minimal, but not uncontrolled immigration. And Sharon Harrison wrote, it's not knives, it's the idiots using them. Take away the sharp end of a knife and they will use a screwdriver. What the hell is this screwed up world coming to? So I love all of your comments during the live show. Thank you for being part of the Outspoken community. And of course, now we reveal today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. The nominations for Union Jackass. 6 Felicity went for Prince Harry for pressuring King Charles. Anna Island nominated Kanye West for pimping his partner to hijack optics at the Grammy Awards. And Diane at Mother Clanger went for Nicola Marfleet, the governor of Woodhill Prison, for being complicit in banning visitors for Tommy Robinson and blocking his son's phone number. Well, in third place with 19% of the vote, Kanye West for that Grammys nudity. In second place, Prince Harry for pressuring King Charles with 32% of your vote. And with 49% of the vote, the winner, today's Union Jackass, Nicola Marfleet, the governor of Tommy Robinson's prison, Woodhill. And on a very similar note, actually, today's Greatest Britain nominee comes from Mel Weller, who says has to be Tommy Robinson. Just look how many patriots came out to support him. Whether you like him or not, you shouldn't ignore him. Thank you so much for all of your amazing feedback over the course of the day. Coming up in the Uncancelled After Show, where we move to Substack, I'm teaming up with the Royal News Network for all the big headlines out of Buckingham Palace over the weekend, and Montecito too, where Meghan Markle has, surprise, emerged from her LA wildfires hibernation to gatecrash another Hollywood event where she wasn't wanted. So sign up for the after show, www.outspoken.live. I promise you, it is really worth being part of our community on Substack. It is a free speech platform. Coming tomorrow, by the way, exclusively to Substack, a very special town hall interview ahead of the launch of the Vaccine People's Inquiry. So www.outspoken.live is how to sign up, and you get alerted to all of those Substack exclusives, plus get to watch the after show on demand or live every day if you want to. www.outspoken.live. Have I mentioned that address enough today? I will shut up now and say we are back tomorrow at 5 p.m. UK time, midday Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. June Slater and Lilani Dowding joining us on the Superstar panel with Angela Levin up as well. Hit subscribe right now on YouTube or Rumble, but I most importantly promise to keep fighting for you and hope to see you on the after show with Brittany from the Royal News Network on Substack in just a couple of minutes' time.